Yes.
Very nice. We are talking about we just did the lateral line, so we're talking about fish migrations now. Schooling behavior, fish behavior, that's what we're talking about now. Hello. This isn't working. There we go. So the last two bonuses were neuromass or clusters of sensory cells found in the
scales,
lateral line, and 3 bands of muscles on the side of fish are called myomeres.
Where? Yeah, I felt that.
Did I tell you about the shark I was chasing around in the Galapagos?
No.
I'm just chasing him around. I was thinking he might get annoyed and turn around and attack me, but he never did.
What was your plan?
I didn't really have a plan. I was just following, trying to get a good picture. We did all this. We did all this. This is what y'all missed yesterday. Okay, territoriality in fish. Should I turn this out? See better? Or no?
Yeah.
Makes you fall asleep? Open that line to get a little more light. Some fish are territorial all the time. Others territorial during reproduction. So territoriality is when you guard your area. Fish maintain their territories normally by posturing to show their aggression. Posturing can include raised fins, open mouth, darting, etc. So fish will guard a certain amount of territory. They need a certain amount of space. It keeps the organism spread out. Nyaka's here. You're late. How are y'all always excused?
I was late once, and I wasn't excused. I was sort of upset by it.
I wouldn't excuse anyone. No excuse. You know how many times I've been late in my 21-year teaching career?
None.
Never.
Twice. You don't have to be late. Just get here. Slept through my alarm. It was they were both in my first year teaching. I was still kind of young when we began. All right. So I showed the video yesterday of the fish kind of bowing up to each other and opening their mouths real wide. And usually what fish will do is they'll do this, they'll swim around and they'll make themselves look big. And a lot of them can puff themselves up by taking in water. And usually the smaller of the two kind of backs off and says, okay, I'll find another territory. So they usually don't actually fight. And another behavior fish have is schooling behavior. Schooling is done for a lot of reasons, and I got a nice little video here on it. It makes small fish appear large. So, when you're a fish and you look a distance in the water and you see this big mass of something coming towards you that's actually a school of fish, you don't know what it is. Fish are pretty dumb, first of all. And if they see this big massive thing coming at them, they'll usually get away. It might be a shark coming to eat them, or a big whale or something coming to eat them. It's actually a school of fish, so it makes a small fish that might be preyed upon, it makes them seem real big, and the big fish that would eat them get away, get out of there. Also, even if the big fish does realize it's just a bunch of small fish, it's hard when there's a big school to catch any one particular fish. So that's an advantage, because you can't focus when there's so many around. You can't focus on one.
Mr. Willis,
Yes.
the question on the quiz about schooling, the answer was lateral line, right?
That's right.
In the book it says these fish probably use the lateral line, olfaction, and sound they emit to keep track of each other. So shouldn't the olfactory one be also a correct answer?
Huh. Probably so. Is that what you put?
Yep.
Good argument. A good argument. You know what olfaction means?
Smell.
Okay. If you wouldn't know what olfaction means, I would have. Another thing about schooling is it's easy to find a mate. You got a whole bunch of fish in one area, so you don't have to search for a mate very long. There's probably one in the school somewhere. And that's true in high school too. I don't know. There's a bunch of fish. Here's a big fish comes through, and the little fish can kind of feel where the big fish is by the current movements, and they can see them, and they can smell. There's a lot of ways that schooling works, and so they'll just be able to avoid the bigger fish. And the bigger fish can't seem to catch any single one of them. So here's a little YouTube video on schooling behavior.
Humanity, despite our feelings of individuality and uniqueness, can be looked upon as very much a collective organism. A life of solitude is hard to come by. Even those that maroon themselves on a remote island end up in some kind of aggregation, whether it's a party on a beach, lunch with friends, walking down a busy street, or taking a ferry. Our existence inevitably brings us to that of a group. And this behavior is common throughout the animal kingdom. Many species aggregate together for many different reasons, from protection, breeding, and feeding, through to travel or migration. Marine ecosystems exhibit some of the most obvious examples, and 80% of all fish species enter into schooling behavior at some stage in their life cycles. Multiple species of fish come together to form shoals, like those here over the coral reefs and rocky pinnacles surrounding Koh Tao in the Gulf of Thailand. Schools of individual fish species also appear in this area in large numbers. These aggregations can be some of the most impressive in nature, as they dance and weave at high speeds in perfect synchrony, like a single giant organism, as if they were interconnected by a network of invisible neurons. As spectacular as it is to witness, it's perhaps more amazing when one considers the questions of how and why. Why do they come together in these shoals and schools? And how did this behavior evolve? How do they stay together in such tight-knit units? And how do these collectives make decisions about their movements and behavior so rapidly? In this short film, we aim to explore some of these questions. Below the glassy waters of Turtle Island, it's easy to find both schooling and shoaling behavior. Here at Chumpon Pinnacle, a large school of fusiliers show that more fish mean more eyes with which they can locate potential threats. When one reacts to danger, they all warn each other and react together, sweeping from place to place in near perfect harmony. Contrary to popular opinion, schools don't form deliberate shapes as if to mimic a giant fish to scare off predators. The confusion, however, created by multiple silver bodies moving in perfect unison, causes a sensory overload in the predator, meaning that they cannot distinguish between individuals and are unable to select a target. Predators such as these trevally can often be seen trying to separate the school to make it easier to pick out individuals. There is a dilution effect by being in a school. For any given predator attack, the proportion of individuals taken will be lower the larger the school is, and so each individual has a higher chance of surviving the attacks. An increased ability to locate resources is also a likely driving force in the evolution of schooling. Many of the schooling species located around Koh are forage fish, which feed on zooplankton such as these fusiliers. Zooplankton are incredibly adept at detecting approaching predators using their sensitive antennae. This ability to detect oncoming predators is also backed up by incredible speed and the ability to jump out of the way of predators. On the counter-offensive, these forage fish have developed a behavior called ram feeding, which involves the school forming into a grid with equal spacing between each fish. These spacing arrangements, amazingly, are exactly equal in length to the distance that the zooplankton can jump, and with the zooplankton only being able to jump up to 80 times, they're effectively jumping into another fish's mouth, ensuring the whole school gets fed. A remarkable evolutionary feature. Alongside these feeding benefits come advantages in reproductive activity. A shoal consists of multiple species of fish brought together by their need for refuge and food, and is most commonly encountered amidst the tropical coral reefs of the world. As seen here at Chumpon Pinnacle, shoals will also contain multiple members of the same species, so it should be easier to find mates than if the population were spread out across the open ocean. Many fish found around reefs are ones which have found lifelong mates such as these bannerfish. Further still, in addition to these benefits, fish in shoals and schools are energy efficient. It has been found that the tail beat frequency of a school was significantly higher in the fish located at the front of the school than the individuals in the middle, which apparently benefit from some form of a slipstream effect. It would be reasonable to assume that there is some energy efficient advantages to travelling in schools, particularly amongst migratory fish, which have to travel thousands of miles to their breeding, feeding and nursery grounds. With all of these advantages for shoaling and schooling, it's not hard to imagine the evolution of this behaviour. The age-old safety in numbers philosophy doesn't ring any truer than when you consider schooling fish species. Many scientists believe that schooling evolved through the selfish fish principle. An individual fish will try and put as many others between itself and danger as possible in order to stay alive. Predators can relatively easily pick off individual fish and those at the edge of a group. Natural selection will therefore favour the genes of fish which have the tendency to swim to the centre of the group. These survival genes have sustained through time, resulting in the highly efficient, highly compact schools we see today. Survival being the name of the game, it is also highly likely that this behaviour has evolved through the increased chance of catching prey. A single fish would have very little chance of successfully catching zooplankton, whereas working in a team, the chances become much higher. The quicker the zooplankton became, the larger these groups became, until entire schools of fish formed, all working and moving together to catch their prey. And with movement in mind, how do these fish move in such synchrony, evading predators and obstacles without ever breaking the chain or bumping into each other? Is this behaviour learned, or is it embedded in their nature? Young fish do in fact practice schooling behaviour. At first, they make acquaintance in pairs, but as they grow older, they begin to develop into larger groups. We start to gain the impression then that schooling is not a learned activity, but an instinctive one, absent of parental influence, integral from birth. To be able to stay in such close proximity and move the way schools of fish do without collisions, the fish have developed sensory systems which give them a great deal of information about their surroundings. First and foremost, fish use sight. A fish's eye is located directly on the side of their head so that they can see the fish next to them, and more importantly, the bodily markers present on most schooling fish's bodies. These markers help them maintain their position in relation to their neighbours. The eye is very important for the maintenance of position and angle in a school. Speed and direction is monitored using a sensory organ called the lateral line, which is located on either side of the fish's body, from the back of its gills to the base of the tail. The lateral line has been found to be sensitive to changes in water currents and vibration in water. These two sensors work as opposing forces to maintain the distance between each fish in the school. With this amazing ability to synchronize their movements, how do they know in which direction to move when confronted with predators, where to stop and forage, and when and where to migrate? Their almost telepathic ability to move as one when a predator attacks is based on a behavior called consensus decision-making. The individuals in a school will watch what the majority of its neighbours are doing and will follow suit. When one side of the school is attacked, the fish closest to the danger will take evasive action, causing a ripple effect through the school as the rest react to this new movement by their neighbours. This behaviour will usually result in a correct decision, as each individual fish will be acting in its own best interests. It is during the night time, however, that the schools will disintegrate into shoals as the fish attempt to take refuge in the coral. They do this because their sight is extremely limited at night and are unable to maintain a tight-knit school. And it's during this time predators such as these barracuda will begin to hunt and take advantage of their inability to form schools. Schooling behaviour seems to have all the answers that fish need to live their lives in relative comfort and safety. But is the story all good? Some species have learned to thrive on this behaviour. Whale sharks, for example, have recently been documented gulping up vast numbers of young mackerel and anchovies as they swim through schools determined to pack closer together, making a huge feast a relatively simple task. As in all ecosystems, survival of the fittest relies on evolution and counter-evolution of predators and prey. A race played out over millions of years as tiny adjustments in the genes and behaviour allow some to thrive and others to fall by the wayside. As human evolution continues, so do the many ways in which we...
Okay, that's enough of that. Some good info on schooling and some good video. Lost my remote. That's right. Alright, cool. Now, we talked about how most fish are either freshwater or saltwater, but there are some fish that do both. And these are two words you need to know, anadromous and catadromous. You kids get them confused all the time. Anadromous species like salmon, lampreys, sturgeon, they normally live in saltwater, but go to freshwater to reproduce. So a salmon is a saltwater fish, but it reproduces in the rivers. Have you all ever heard of the salmon swimming upstream? And they can actually jump up waterfalls, some of them, and they go way upstream and then they reproduce and then they die because they're so worn out. Kind of a rough life. And the bears are sitting there just picking them off. So anadromous live in salt, go to fresh. Catadromous, like the American eel, live in fresh water, but go to salt water to reproduce. So an American eel is a fish. So how can you remember that? Catadromous live in fresh but travel to salt. And anadromous live in salt but travel to fresh for reproduce. Any way to remember that? Cats like fresh water? No, they don't. They drink fresh water. I used to spray my cat with water when he jumped on the table. You remember it however you want. I just know that half the class is going to mess it up. Here's a little map that shows the salmons, where you find the Pacific salmon at least, and where you find the tuna, skipjack tuna. These are the spawning grounds of the skipjack tuna. Why is this here? I'm not sure why this picture's here. The skipjack tuna, the leading commercial catch among tunas, undertakes extensive migrations. Oh, this is about migrations. This is the next one. So, the book also talks about how a lot of fish migrate. Migrating is moving large distances. Y'all have heard of birds go south for the winter and that sort of thing. That's a migration. So fish often do a migration, and you can migrate across the whole ocean. We'll see whales, when next chapter we study mammals, whales do huge migrations too. So the book talks a little bit about these migrations. Why would you do a migration? Well, sometimes there are places and times in the ocean where there's more food, you see. And so, like at a certain time of the year, there's a current that brings a lot of nutrients up to, say, from the poles to the equator. More nutrients come up, and so you get more plankton there. And so you want to migrate there at that time to get more food. And so there's movements that organisms have kind of evolved over the years to be able to get the most food. And to be able to reproduce in areas that have a lot of food so that the young have something to eat. And maybe if you migrate over here, you escape predators. So there's a lot of reasons for migration, and different organisms migrate in different ways. There's some salmon swimming upstream. Sockeye salmon. The fish have to swim far upstream, often leaping over rapids and waterfalls. Many fall prey to hungry predators or to the nets and lines of fishermen. Here's this shows the eel. This is what an eel looks like. It's a fish, just kind of long and thin. It looks kind of like a snake. And there's what its baby looks like. The larvae are the little babies. And that's really tiny. It's like plankton that we catch in our nets. And so the adult eels they normally live in the rivers in the freshwater areas, but they go out here to the Sargasso Sea. Do y'all remember that? We talked about that. It has a bunch of algae, a bunch of brown algae, kelp, kind of floating around. And so the eels will go out here to mate and lay their eggs. And then, of course, they spawn. They just kind of spray their eggs out in the water, and the eggs, and spray their sperm out in the water, and the eggs and sperm come together. And then the baby eels, the larva is the thin line here. The larva will swim back to the continent and go back in the rivers to live their life. And then they'll come back to the Sargasso Sea out here to mate again. And the European eels do the same thing, only they come out here and mate and then go back to Europe in the freshwater areas around Europe. That's a long way to go just to mate. So I taught the last part of this chapter talks about reproduction, and we're on 170 now. And so most fish spawn. It's called broadcast spawning, releasing eggs and sperm directly into the water for fertilization. That's what most fish do. A single fish might spray out 1,000 eggs. And then a male on top of it sprays out millions of sperm. And if it's a whole school doing this, the water gets all cloudy with sperm and eggs. Pretty gross. And the sperm fertilize the eggs, and then you get a fertilized egg. You know what a fertilized egg is called?
Zygote.
A zygote. And that multiplies and forms a little baby fish, the larvae. And that larvae can swim around, and most of them get eaten by other fish, but some of them survive just by the numbers of them and grow into an adult.
Do fish sleep?
That's a good question. There's been a lot of research on that, and it shows that, yeah, fish can sleep to some extent, especially the kinds of fish that use sight a lot. And so what they'll do is they'll settle into a coral reef and kind of go into a state where they're not doing much. But it's not sleep like we have, where they're closing their eyes and not conscious. It's just kind of a state of not much movement. So most fish do that. Some fish have internal fertilization. That's like mammals do it. Sperm is inserted directly into the female by the male. You see that in a lot of sharks. Complex mating behaviors are seen in some species. They'll often do mating dances and rituals where they perform certain movements before they mate. I think I have some of them on video here. So you can see a little fish sex going on. And they often have to do their little mating dance correctly before they'll mate with one another. Here the male gets behind the female, and when she sprays the eggs out, then he'll come behind her and spray the sperm on top of it. There's a big cloud of sperm and eggs in the water. Here's some video footage of it. A bunch of eggs. Isn't that gross? See again? Every one of those can be a baby fish. The fish have a high capacity for reproduction. If you put some fish into an area where there's no predators or anything, they can grow in numbers really quickly.
How long is the gestation period of fish?
It depends on the species.
Oh. Is
but
it like
it can
long
be from days to weeks to months and years. I mean, some fish remain juvenile for a long time.
Okay.
You know, the really big fish might take 20 years, 30 years to grow as big as they do.
Ensuring there is another generation is a dangerous journey, and finding out is the first step. Mandarin fish spend most of their lives secreted under rubble, their exquisite patterning criminally hidden from view. They choose the time to mate carefully. In the growing dusk, they stir like bashful gems. A furtive courting dance soon gives way to the risk of reverie. They drift above the reef and in a flurry of fins place their bets in the lottery of life. Fish show two main strategies for the game of chance. Produce a few eggs, and like the clown triggerfish, look after them very well, or produce countless eggs and cast them far and wide to face countless risks. It's a gamble, and nowhere is the gamble so dramatic as when a group decide to place the same bet at the same time. Unlike the secretive mandarin fish, surgeonfish use dusk to break cover on an extraordinary scale. Fitful at first, courting pairs rise to release clouds of eggs and sperm. They're soon joined by others, and a frenzy ensues. In the fading light, their sex turns the reef's crystal waters opaque with clouds of hope. For them, and millions of others, this is the beginning of the greatest journey never told.
Next, Rose.
Where do the zygotes go after they're fertilized?
They just float around. And one thing about doing that in huge groups is that you lay so many eggs, there's so much food there, that if a predator comes by, they can only eat so much and they get full. And so there's still a lot left. And so if you do it all together like that, there's so much food at one point that you're assured some of them surviving. This is a little mating dance that, what kind of fish are these? Atlantic cod are doing. And they've studied these Atlantic cod, and they do an exact mating dance. And only when they do it right will they end up mating. Look, they're like on top of one another.
That's so weird.
You can guess the next evolutionary step is internal fertilization. They're spawning right on top of one another. This is a little video showing an experiment with
Young mustard
sticklebacks.
rares are attacked regardless of shape. The male reacts to a fat model by performing his zigzag dance. If the model follows the male to the nest, he points his snout to the opening while inclining his back towards the model.
He's kind of dumb. He thinks that's another fish. He's mating with it. Fish aren't very smart.
A pear-shaped piece of plaster, known as the sex bomb, produces an instant courtship response.
Doesn't even have to look like a fish. Just got to have a certain shape, and it'll try and mate with it.
Notice how the male keeps his back towards the model. If we insert a dummy tail into the nest, the male quivers against it, as he would to a real fish.
That's interesting. You can do all sorts of experiments like this if you go into this field. You put fish in tanks and study their mating behaviors. This is a shark, and the male shark has the two, they call claspers. And they're often used for delivering sperm to the female. Somehow they have like packets of sperm or something that they'll put inside the female with those claspers. Some more words you need to know. And here you go. This is great multiple choice stuff. Viviparous means the young are born live. Viviparous. That's what humans are. Oviparous mean you lay eggs. That's like a chicken. ova, egg. Now it gets tough. Ovoviviparous. That's like a combination between the two. Eggs are kept inside the mother and hatch before being released from the female reproductive tract. So that instead of laying the egg stays inside the mom and the egg hatches inside the mom. Isn't that weird? Ovoviviparous. And then finally there's parthenogenic. The young develop directly from the unfertilized eggs of the female. The young are clones of the female. A lot of fish, if they can't find a mate, will do this parthenogenesis. And they'll lay eggs. And if a male comes along and fertilizes the eggs, that's great. The eggs get fertilized, and the babies are kind of a combination of the dad and the mom. But if the mom lays eggs and no male comes along, then the eggs hatch into a clone of the mom. So she doesn't need a father. And we call that parthenogenesis, or a parthenogenic fish. Doesn't necessarily need a male to fertilize. There's only a few types of organisms that can do this. Ants can do it. And there's some fish that can do it. So there you go. 4 choices, multiple choice. Yellow-tailed damselfish from the Galapagos Islands, like many other damselfish, establishes and actively defends breeding sites where females lay their eggs. So like I said in the video, there are some fish that just lay a few eggs and guard them. That's a different strategy. You either lay a whole bunch of eggs and hope some survive, or just lay a few eggs and guard them and make sure they survive. 2 strategies, both of them work. You ever seen one of these washed up on the beach? After they wash up on the beach, they become brown and leathery.
Are they called like mermaids' purses?
Mermaid's purses, that's right, yeah. That's a shark egg case. And if you were to look inside of it, you would find a baby shark. And there's the food that is feeding the shark. Remember those sharks? I gave you, a couple of you had something coming out of them. That's this thing right here that was attached to their yolk, what they're feeding off of. And as they absorb these nutrients, they get larger and larger, see? And pretty soon they get so big that they eat their way out of this case. And sometimes, and those cases are usually attached to something, like attached to a rock or a coral or something, and they'll break off and wash up in a storm. And so sometimes you find these washed up on shore. Usually, after they wash up on shore, they dry out, and whatever was in it is, kind of, can't tell what was in it. That's what they look like. So the male shark will mate with the female shark, and she'll form these purses inside of her and then lay the purses. And here's some more fish. Butterfly fish mating with one another. So that finishes our chapter here on marine fish, and there's kind of a table in the back that It shows all the different kinds. And that's all of chapter 8. So we're done with fish there. We go to mammals next. So we'll do whales and walruses and all the marine mammals and birds and stuff too, coming up next chapter. So we don't have time for the chart video, but I'm going to show you the chart video. I'm not going to be here on Tuesday, so we'll make sure to watch that. Okay?